Marcus Walker stepped out of his car into the humid August morning, blending effortlessly into the small town of Highland Grove. The streets were quiet, the scent of wet pavement lingering in the air after last night's rain. Dressed in a simple plaid shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, he looked like just another ordinary person. Not the seasoned law enforcement officer who had climbed through the ranks for over 20 years. This, Marcus knew, was the only way to see the truth, unfiltered and untouched by the polished world of formal meetings and rehearsed greetings. As a black man stepping into the role of police chief in a precinct plagued by whispers of misconduct and division, Marcus understood the weight of his mission. He wasn't just here to wear a badge. He was here to dismantle a toxic culture, to expose the fractures that had been hidden under layers of routine and complacency. But he knew the resistance wouldn't come easy. Not in a department where whispers of racism and injustice had become part of the fabric. Walking into the precinct, Marcus kept his head low, unnoticed by the officers hustling about their daily duties. There were no greetings, no special attention. It felt oddly comfortable, like he was just another face in the crowd. But he wasn't here to blend in. He was here to observe, to understand. And today, the observation was about to begin. He stood still for a moment in watching the subtle interactions around him, the casual laughter, the sideways glances, the quiet whispers between officers. He knew that what he was about to see would be eye-opening, but Marcus Walker was prepared. For him, this wasn't just a job. It was a calling. The storm that was about to unfold would change everything, but he wouldn't back down. He had a plan, and it was time to set it in motion. The morning had seemed deceptively calm, but Marcus Walker could already feel the tension swirling beneath the surface. As he walked through the precinct, the noise of ringing phones and idle chatter surrounded him, yet he remained vigilant. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, an undercurrent of disdain and entitlement among the officers. As he passed the break room, his eyes caught a small group huddled near the table, their laughter too loud, too forced. It was a moment of normalcy to them, but to Marcus, it felt like the calm before a storm. And then it happened. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Officer Daniels, a man with a reputation for cruelty and arrogance, approaching. His stance was confident, too confident, and there was something in the way his eyes locked onto Marcus that made the air grow heavier. "Hey you," Daniels sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Lost? This isn't a shelter. You need to move along." Marcus held his ground, trying to gauge the situation, but before he could respond, Daniels took a step closer, a mocking smile on his face. "You don't belong here," Daniels spat, his words sharp and cruel, aimed to degrade. And then, in one vile motion, the officer spat directly into Marcus's face. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Marcus's breath hitched as the warm saliva dripped down his cheek. The group of officers laughed, the sound harsh and mocking, but Marcus didn't flinch. His mind was racing, but his exterior remained calm, composed. This wasn't about him. This was about the culture that had allowed this to happen. With slow, deliberate movements, Marcus pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his face. His voice, calm yet firm, broke through the laughter. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through these doors?" The laughter died instantly. Marcus turned, walking away with his head held high, knowing this incident would be the spark that ignited the fire. He had seen enough. It was time to show them what real leadership looked like. As Marcus walked into the briefing room, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Officers shuffled in, their chatter dying down as they realized something was different. The room, normally filled with casual banter, was now tense with anticipation. The moment Marcus entered, their eyes followed him. He was no longer just the new chief. They were about to find out exactly who they were dealing with. Captain Turner, the old guard, stood at the front ready to introduce Marcus, still unaware of the storm brewing. The officers, including Daniels, leaned against the wall, their smug expressions betraying their false sense of superiority. Daniels, still riding high on his earlier victory, didn't notice the change in the air. "All right, settle down," Captain Turner said, motioning for the room to quiet down. "We've got an important introduction today. I'd like you to meet our new chief." Marcus stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the otherwise silent room. The folder in his hand bore the precinct's official seal, but the weight of the moment wasn't about paperwork. It was about the truth that was about to be unveiled. The officers' attention snapped to him, a subtle shift in their stance, as they realized he wasn't just the new chief. They had no idea who he really was. Marcus looked over the room, letting the silence hang, then spoke. "Good morning. My name is Marcus Walker. As of today, I am your new chief of police." The room froze. Daniel's face turned ghostly pale as realization hit him like a freight train. The same officer who had spat in his face stood in front of them, wielding the power to change everything. "You think I didn't belong here," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "But it wasn't just me you disrespected. It was the badge, the oath, and the community we serve." His gaze locked with Daniel's, and the room held its breath. The power dynamic had just shifted, and Marcus made it clear. No one, not even the officers who thought they were untouchable, would escape accountability. Marcus paused, letting his words sink in as the officers absorbed the weight of the revelation. The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with the unspoken realization that their actions had consequences far beyond what they had ever imagined. Marcus could feel the simmering discomfort from Daniels, who stood frozen, his once smug confidence shattered. Stepping closer to the podium, Marcus's voice hardened. "I watched as you spat in my face. You assumed I didn't matter. But that assumption, that's why this department is losing the trust of the people we swore to protect." Daniel shifted, his posture slumping as he stammered. "Chief, I didn't know. I didn't mean—" Marcus cut him off, his eyes sharp as steel. "The problem, Daniels, is that you didn't care to know. You didn't stop to think about your actions before you acted. And now you have to face the consequences." The room was silent, every officer holding their breath as the weight of Marcus's words echoed in their minds. Daniels was a man who had used his badge to intimidate, belittle, and degrade. But now that badge was no longer a shield. It was a symbol of his downfall. Marcus didn't flinch. "Effective immediately, Officer Daniels. You are suspended pending an internal investigation. Your actions today will not be overlooked." A murmur ran through the room, but Marcus held up his hand, silencing the room once more. He locked eyes with every officer present. "This is not a punishment. This is a standard. If you can't rise to it, this isn't the place for you." Daniel stood in stunned silence, his face pale, the confidence he once held crumbling away. As the officers filed out of the room, avoiding eye contact, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. He had set the tone, and now the change was inevitable. The department would be held accountable, and Marcus would lead it, no matter the cost. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere at the precinct was noticeably different. The once lax environment was now filled with whispers and cautious glances. Marcus continued his rounds, his presence a constant reminder of the change he had promised. His eyes never missed a detail, and neither did the officers. He saw it in their eyes. Some had accepted the shift, while others resisted. Officer Daniels, despite his suspension, was still a topic of conversation, a symbol of the fracture within the department. Marcus entered the break room one morning, his usual calm demeanor met by a quiet that filled the space. Officer Reyes, a younger recruit, approached him hesitantly, her head slightly lowered. "Chief, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice soft but determined. I was complicit. I didn't stand up when I should have." Marcus raised an eyebrow, silently urging her to continue. "I've seen the toxic behavior. I laughed. I looked the other way," she confessed, her face flushed with regret. "I was afraid of retaliation, but I can't keep ignoring it." Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "Admitting it is the first step, Officer Reyes. It's about making the choice to do better from here on out. But it starts with you. If you can hold yourself accountable, the rest will follow." She nodded, her eyes meeting his with newfound resolve. It wasn't just about discipline anymore. It was about transforming the culture, eradicating the complacency that had allowed officers like Daniels to thrive. Later that day, Marcus met with Captain Harris, who was more subdued than usual. "Chief, I see the changes taking effect. But Daniels, he's fighting the suspension, claims unfair treatment." Marcus sat back, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "Let him fight. His appeal won't change what we stand for." I won't let the system protect someone who has proven he's beyond redemption. The days of sweeping things under the rug are over. Captain Harris hesitated, his voice filled with both admiration and concern. You shook a lot of them up today, sir. Marcus sighed, looking out the window at the precinct's parking lot. It's a necessary shakeup. Change isn't easy, but it's what's needed, and we're just getting started. The weeks following Marcus's decisive leadership had been a mix of progress and pushback. The precinct had shifted, but not without resistance. While some officers embraced the new culture of accountability, others, especially the old guard, were reluctant to let go of their ingrained habits. Daniels' suspension, though justified, had become a rallying cry for those who resented the changes, and whispers of discontent spread like wildfire. Marcus had expected as much. Real change, he knew, never comes easy. He continued his work, walking the halls of the precinct, his eyes sharp, taking note of both the subtle and overt signs of resistance. He knew some officers were still testing the waters, waiting for the moment when they could challenge him. But he was prepared. One morning, as Marcus entered the briefing room, he was met with a familiar sight, a mix of tension and reluctance, though a subtle air of anxiety hung in the room. Officer Reyes stood at the front, shifting from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. She had changed, that much was evident, but the weight of the new expectations still weighed heavily on her. Chief, we need to talk, she began, voice low but steady. There's something, I've been hearing things. Some of the guys, officers who aren't with the program, are planning something. They think they can bring Daniels back, or at least make sure he gets reinstated. Marcus's eyes darkened, but he remained calm. And what exactly are they planning? Reyes hesitated but pressed on. They're speaking in private, talking about a vote of no confidence. They believe if they stick together, they can force your hand. They're testing you, Chief. Marcus stood still, absorbing her words. This was more than just insubordination. This was a direct challenge to his leadership, to the principles he had fought so hard to instill. His mind raced, but his voice remained steady as he addressed the room. Let them try, he said, his tone cold but resolute. But they'll fail. The precinct is mine now, and I'm not backing down. No one will stand in the way of justice. Not now, not ever. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Marcus knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Days after Reyes' warning, the tension in the precinct grew palpable. Marcus could feel the eyes of some of his officers on him, their judgment hidden behind forced politeness. The insidious whispers of discontent had spread throughout the building, carried on hushed tones in the break room and locker areas. There was a growing sense that his leadership was being questioned, and a plan was in motion to undermine his authority. One morning, as Marcus entered the building, the air felt charged. He had learned to trust his instincts, and they were telling him that today was going to be different. As he walked through the hallways, his eyes caught sight of familiar faces, officers who had once greeted him with respect, but now looked away, voiding his gaze. When he entered the briefing room, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Officer Daniels, though suspended, had found his way back into the building, standing defiantly at the back with a small group of officers. They wore expressions that ranged from resentment to blatant defiance. Marcus's heart beat steadily as he stepped to the front of the room. The officers fell silent, awaiting what would come next. You all know why we're here, Marcus began, his voice clear and unwavering. There's a cancer growing in this precinct, and it's time to cut it out. His eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Daniels, whose arrogance seemed to have returned in full force. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd been prepared for this confrontation. Some of you think I'm here to make friends, but I'm not, he continued. I'm here to make a difference, and if you're not with me, then you're against me. A murmur rippled through the officers, but Marcus wasn't finished. He raised his hand, silencing the room. Those who choose to divide us, who choose to hold on to the toxic culture we've lived with for so long, are no longer welcome in my department. Daniel stepped forward, his face red with fury. You think you can just run us all out? You'll never have control over this place. Marcus met his challenge with a calm gaze. The only thing I need control over is my own actions. As for the rest of you, well, we'll see who's left standing when the dust settles. It was a standoff, an unspoken war of wills, But Marcus knew the fight had just begun, and this time he wasn't going to lose. The room held its breath as the power dynamics shifted, and Marcus felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. Change wasn't just a vision, it was now a battle for the soul of the precinct. The days following the confrontation in the briefing room were tense. Marcus could feel the subtle resistance of a few officers still clinging to the old ways. But things had changed. He had made his stand, and the precinct was forced to recognize that it couldn't go on with the same toxic culture that had been allowed to fester for so long. As the weeks passed, Marcus's resolve remained unwavering. He spent countless hours reworking policies, holding one-on-one sessions with officers to rebuild trust, and introducing new training programs on respect, diversity, and integrity. Despite the challenges, there were glimpses of hope. Officer Reyes, who had once expressed her doubts, began to speak up more. Slowly, she became one of Marcus's strongest allies. Together, they held regular meetings with the rest of the department, and over time, the mood in the precinct shifted. But not everyone was on board. Officer Daniels's appeal against his suspension was denied, but that didn't stop him from continuing to stir the pot. He played the victim, rallying support from a small group of officers still resistant to change. It was clear that this fight wasn't just about one officer, it was about transforming an entire culture. But Marcus had come to realize that true leadership wasn't about imposing his will. It was about inspiring others to change, even when it felt impossible. One evening, as he stood at the precinct's entrance, watching his officers leave for the day, Marcus was struck by a realization. Leadership isn't about power, it's about responsibility. It's about setting the example and having the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. In life, we all encounter toxic environments and negative forces. But like Marcus, we can choose to be the catalyst for change. It may not be easy and it may not happen overnight, but standing up for what's right and holding ourselves accountable can transform the world around us. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought within ourselves, and in the end, it's the strength of our character that will define us.